Y'all, I have been thinking about this comment that I saw on a TikTok a couple weeks ago. I think I saw it before I left to go to Emerald City Comic Con, and it's been sitting in the back of my mind ever since, and I think it's going to be my mantra for the rest of my life. This comment says, "Hey, so it actually only has to make sense to me for me to do it, and I don't feel like explaining it to anybody else." That is so tea. That is so tea, because it only has to make sense to me for me to do it. If this is your first time seeing me, hello, my name is DJ Kirkland. I'm a professional comic book artist that's based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and welcome to the YouTube channel. Y'all, for the last couple of weeks, I've been racking my brain on what my next video was going to be. I've honestly been overthinking it for a while, and I finally landed on doing an AMA. And what is an AMA, you ask? It's Ask Me Anything. So I took to Instagram and I asked my followers to ask me whatever questions they had about my creative process. So for today's video, we are going to tackle 10 questions about my creative process. Question number 1, how did you get your start? And what inspired you to create your hot big boy art? I love this question. I think it's a great question to kick the whole video off. So let's start from the beginning. I have been drawing ever since I could pick up a pencil. I am honestly so blessed and grateful to have parents that have been super supportive of me and my art career. For the most part, I would say that I am a self-taught artist, but I did take as many art classes as I could when I was in school, and I would also take some extracurricular art classes when my parents were able to afford it. And when I got to high school and I started looking at college applications and I found out that you could actually go to school for art, that was when I was laser focused on going to art school and getting a degree in some form of art, whether that be comics, illustration, animation, graphic design, or something. I knew I was going to an art school the second I got out of high school. While I would say I mostly enjoyed my experience in art school, I do have some grievances and concerns about art colleges in general, but that's a subject for another video. Now to the second part of that first question, how did I get inspired to make all this luscious, sexy, fun, and beautiful big boy art? One day I just decided I like big guys and I love manga. I love artists like Tagame and Jiraiya, and I wanted to see more manga influenced art that actually featured more black and brown big bodies. So I have the ability, I have the tools necessary to be able to make that art myself. So I just started making it one day. And that's where I got my start in making all the big boy art that you see all over my social media now. Question number 2, what is the go-to playlist or songs that you listen to while you're making your work? I love this question so much, and it really does kind of depend on the mood. So when I'm doing like sketching or anything like that, sometimes I just put on TV shows that I've watched a million times over. So for me, I like actually watching reruns of Project Runway because it reminds me the most of what it was like being in studio art classes in art school. So that's kind of my happy place, and hearing all that noise and chatter about the work that they're making and the critiques, that feels the most like being back in college to me. So I love just rewatching old shows like that. Or if I am trying to really get into the zone and really hyper focus on something creatively, I will sometimes listen to music that doesn't have lyrics, because sometimes I tend to get caught up on singing the songs as opposed to just like listening to the music and let it kind of lull me into a flow state to be able to make the work that I want to make. And it also really depends on what part of the art process that I'm doing. If I'm inking, I tend to listen to music that's a little bit slower because I'm trying to be way more intentional about my line work and my mark making. So when I listen to music that has a pretty fast BPM, that tends to make me want to actually draw a lot faster than I probably should. So usually when I'm trying to be intentional and I want to really make sure that the work looks as good as it possibly can, I will slow down and listen to something a little bit slower, or I'll listen to a podcast or something. Question number 3, how do you find inspiration? I feel like this question is a tough one to answer because different people are inspired by different things, and inspiration can strike from anywhere. Much like many other people, I do consume so much media. I watch movies, TV shows, listen to podcasts, listen to albums, watch anime, read manga, comics, you name it. I'm typically consuming some media in some way, form, or fashion. But that doesn't mean I'm always going to be struck by inspiration from those particular things. For the most part, whenever I find inspiration, I usually find it in the places where I least expect it. Sometimes I'll just be working out at the gym and I'll get an idea for something while I'm doing a bench press or something. So I don't have a specific concrete source for where I get my inspiration from, because inspiration is all around us. I know that's such a woo-woo answer, but honestly, inspiration can strike from literally anywhere. Question number 4, how do you study anatomy or plan out your drawings? Honestly, when it comes to anatomy, you've probably heard it a million times from so many people, but studying from life. Now look, I know that life drawing can be boring, and when I was in art school, the life drawing classes were so boring. They really, really were, but it's essential. Being able to understand human anatomy by studying humans and actually drawing from life is an essential skill that you need to learn to become a better artist. I do have some great books to recommend that you can get online that are really helpful in learning how to simplify those forms so that you can get to drawing the things that you actually enjoy drawing a lot faster. These Morpho books are incredible and they're relatively inexpensive. I will have links to them in the description box below. These books are excellent for learning to draw simplified forms. Now, if you want something a little bit more stylized, especially if you like anime or manga inspired books, this book that I'm about to show you is absolutely incredible. It is always at my desk when I'm working. It is Design Your Own Anime and Manga Characters by TB Choi. TB Choi is one of the GOATs of character design that's currently working in the animation industry right now. This book is not like that how to draw manga book that we had back in the 90s and the early 2000s. Hey, this is Editor DJ here really quick. I just have to hop in and just give Katie Coop her flowers. That how to draw manga book that we had in the 2000s fed us millennial artists in ways that I don't think she could ever even imagine. That book was the gateway, the entry point for so many of us back then because there was quite literally nothing else like it on the market. So Katie Coop walked so that TB Choi could run. We would not have this book today if it was not for Katie Coop. All right, back to the video. This book is incredible. I highly recommend this. If you do not have this book in your library already, you gotta go get it. It's phenomenal. So the second part of question number 4 is, how do you plan out your drawings? But I do think that this leads directly into question number 5, which is, how do you pick poses? That's generally the part of drawing that I'm struggling with the most right now. And these things go hand in hand. So whenever I'm trying to plan out a drawing, the thing that I do first is make a thumbnail. And what a thumbnail is just a small drawing that basically nails down a rough composition of what you want your illustration to be. So since I work digitally, I primarily make my thumbnails on a really small canvas, like no more than 100 DPI. If you're unfamiliar with what DPI stands for, it stands for dots per inch. And when it comes to working digitally, having more dots per inch means your canvas is much bigger. So if you're planning on making artwork that you plan to print or you plan to post online, you want to have a higher DPI. So typically most people will recommend at minimum 300 DPI for your images, or larger if they're going to print. So for my personal illustrations, I tend to work at either 300 or 350 DPI. However, when I'm working with a comic book publisher, or I'm working with a manufacturer to make products, or I'm working with somebody to make something that's a large format, I tend to work at either 400 to 650 DPI. If y'all would like to see a video on how I set up my files, let me know in the comment section. Sorry about that, my designer brain just went off the rails for a second. So when it comes to actually doing thumbnail illustrations, I tend to work very, very small and just to focus on the big shapes of what my illustration is going to be. And I usually do about 3 to 4 different compositions before I settle on the one that I want to make. And then once I'm happy with the thumbnail that I like, then I take it into a different file, expand it, and then I start doing the finer details on the illustration. Now that my designer brain has been activated, this leads directly into question number 6, which is, are you confident in creating prints and getting them print ready all in Procreate? And the short answer to your question is no, because I don't use Procreate. I personally have a couple of mixed feelings about Procreate. I think it's a great entry program for people that are getting into digital art. It's really, really good, but for me, I grew up learning how to do digital art in Photoshop, so it feels very limiting to me. So the program of choice that I use is Clip Studio Paint. I have been using Clip Studio Paint for so long that when I first started using it, that program was referred to as Manga Studio. So that was back in like 2012, 2013, 2014. So it's definitely been a minute and we are locked in like this. However, that isn't to say that it's not completely possible to do a completely finished illustration that's print ready in Procreate. You can absolutely do that. Now, this isn't a dig at Procreate because I think it's a fantastic piece of software that has gotten so many more people into digital art, and it's way more accessible than having to buy a whole computer and a drawing tablet like this. It's just not my go-to piece of software, that's all. Now we're headed into more like philosophical questions that I got from people, which are phenomenal questions, so I hope that you really like the answers to these. Question number 7, when first starting, how did you build up the nerve to get your art out there? So, as somebody that has been on the internet for a very, very, very long time, I've always just put my art out there because I've always wanted to be an artist. I think I knew I wanted to be an artist when I was like 7 years old and when I saw Sailor Moon for the first time. When I saw Sailor Moon transform for the first time, I looked at the TV and I told my mom, that's what I want to do. She comes out of the bathroom and looks at the TV and just sees Usagi twirling and transforming, and she's like, okay, whatever that means. And she saw that it turned into me loving creating art. And like I said at the beginning of the video, I've been supported by my parents in all of my creative endeavors that I've had my entire life. So I knew from the jump that this was something that I wanted to do. And for me, putting my art out there has been something that has come relatively easy for me. I'm definitely going to age myself with this, but I remember when DeviantArt was the de facto place to post your art online. This is the early days of when I was scanning in images that I would draw to my computer and upload them directly to DeviantArt. And mind you, these files were huge for the time, so it would take forever for them to upload on the platform. And DeviantArt was the place where I started building community with other artists online. And I've honestly been friends with some of the people that I've known on DeviantArt ever since. I have been friends with people that I met on DeviantArt for well over 2 decades, and that is a wild thing to even say. So I think what helped me is that the only way that I know that I was going to have whatever my career was going to be in comics or illustration or animation or whatever I wanted to be when I was a kid was just to put myself out there. And again, this was a different era of the internet. It was before social media was really a thing. And while people would say rude things to people online, because they always have, but it's definitely not the same landscape that it is today. So it definitely is scary putting yourself out there, but I do think that as long as you're willing to put yourself out there, that you are going to find a community of people that love what you create, and who knows, those people might become your biggest supporters. Question number 8. I think these things go hand in hand, but the question is, how do you get out of a creative block? That is definitely a tough one. I know for me, whenever I find myself in an artistic rut, I go on and I do something else completely. If I'm working on an illustration and I'm having a hard time with it, that's when I'll stop and I'll write. That's when I'll stop and I'll go to the gym. That's when I'll stop and I'll go like watch a TV show or a movie or play a video game or something, just to give my mind a break from the task at hand. Because sometimes you get so caught up in working on an illustration, or you're trying to figure out what your next piece is going to be, and you keep hitting a wall. That means you need to give your mind a break and take a step back and go do anything else. And after I've had a good night's rest, had something to eat, something to drink, maybe go to the gym or just go outside and touch grass, I can come back to that illustration with fresh eyes and actually see what I was having problems with before and solve that issue in the illustration that day. But yeah, the long and short of it, just take a break. Question number 9 is a doozy, so let's get into it. For the most part, your final art is digital. Are there any physical or traditional steps in your process? I'm curious if there's any physical / traditional steps in your art / comics process, or is it all digital? Either way, what are your views about traditional processes, and did you use many in the past, and do you think you might use them in the future? Love this. This question, 8 down. I love this. So the answer to this question is multifaceted for me. I think as we are in this era of generative AI and it coming after creative jobs, I've been wanting to get back into doing more traditional work. So when I first started, I learned with pencil and paper, printer paper, notebook paper, anything I could get my hands on and draw on. That's what I was making art on as a kid. Even when I was in art school, I was using more expensive art materials, but I was working traditionally for the most part up until about my sophomore year of college. So when we got access to Wacom Cintiqs for the first time. Again, I'm really dating myself by telling all this. But I remember being in my sophomore year of art school and we had 2 or 3 Wacom Cintiqs in our computer lab, and that's when I really started to focus on doing more of my art digitally. Because being a student at the time and not having a whole lot of space to be able to make a lot of art, working digitally was the best route for me to take. But now, as it's been so many years since I was in art school, and now I'm kind of circling back to wanting to do more traditional work. And in my process for making comics specifically, I do use a traditional process when I'm doing my thumbnails. So whenever I'm working on a comic, I will print out the script for the comic, and I will do my page layouts on the actual script. Up until about a couple months ago, I was doing all of my layouts digitally, but I was working with a very small canvas, and then taking those pages once they've been approved, blowing them up, and then inking directly on top of those thumbnails digitally. But what I plan on doing now is doing the thumbnails digitally, printing the pages out, and then inking them traditionally. I so desperately miss getting my hands dirty by working with technical pens, dip pens, ink pens, all that good stuff. That was some of the most fun that I had when I was in college, was doing the inking for all of my comic book pages. I remember taking the advanced inking class in grad school and loving every second of it. And that's where I really developed my skills as an inker. So when I work digitally and people see my line art, they say, wow, your inks are really clean. And that's because I had the foundation of doing inking traditionally. So yeah, going forward, I definitely think I'll be doing a lot more traditional work just because I want that tactile sensation again. I love working digitally, I really do. And for the most part, I will be doing all the final art digitally or doing the final edits digitally, but I definitely want to spend more time getting my hands dirty again and doing more traditional work. And last, but certainly not least, question number 10, which is, have you ever had a moment of, do I really want to do this? If yes, how do you get over that? Man, I think this also kind of goes hand in hand with question number 9 and us being in this era of generative AI and the fear of it taking away the creative jobs from human artists. And there have been moments where I'm at my lowest, where I'm not feeling the most confident about my skills as an artist, or I have a creative block that I'm trying to get through. And I'm like, what is even the point of all of this? And for me, what I always go back to is you have to go back to that younger version of yourself. I always go back to myself when I was 10 or 11 and the amount of excitement that I would have for drawing. I would draw on everything. I would draw on all my schoolwork. I would draw on my tests. I would draw on the study guides. Everything I could get my hands on as a kid, I would draw on because I just love drawing. So whenever I find myself being frustrated or like questioning whether or not do I even want to really do this anymore, I always go back to thinking about my younger self. I think about that younger version of me that aspired to want to make comics. I think about that version of me that made comics on cheap printer paper and stapled them together or put them in sleeves in a binder and tried to present them to people and think that I was going to make the next greatest manga imaginable. And I make sure that I'm always channeling that childlike audacity, the audacity to just make something, no matter how good or how bad it is, just to create something. And I always want that child version of me to be so proud of the adult me who has worked their ass off for the last 30 years trying to make being an artist a reality. That's what I always think about whenever I find myself at my lowest. Whew, okay, so that's it, everybody. That was the 10 questions that I got from my first ever Ask Me Anything on Instagram. I cannot thank y'all enough for going to my Instagram and leaving me some very thoughtful and wonderful questions. This was a great exercise to kind of talk about myself a little bit and to, you know, hopefully inspire you to want to get out there and create things yourself. So if you've gotten this far and you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. I'm so new to this whole YouTube thing, and I'm just trying to get a feel for what makes the most sense for the channel. I'd love to do some time lapses of the illustrations that I make to talk about my art in more depth so that you can see in real time what I'm working on. And also, I have a couple of really cool projects coming up that I can't talk about just yet, but I do want to make videos about those things specifically because I think you guys will really enjoy them. And I do have a couple of events coming up, which I'm very excited about. So at the beginning of May, I will be in attendance at Comic-Con Oakland. I'm very excited to go. That's going to be May 9th and May 10th. It's going to be at the Oakland Convention Center. So if you are in the San Francisco Bay Area, come and see me. I'll be there. I cannot wait to meet you. And on Memorial Day weekend in May, I will be at MomoCon in Atlanta, Georgia. I wasn't there last year because I had a scheduling conflict, but I'm so excited to be back at MomoCon this year as a guest. I cannot wait to see y'all. I'm going to have some new illustrations. I'm going to have some new merch, and I'm going to have something exclusive just for MomoCon. So be on the lookout for that. Again, I cannot thank y'all enough for supporting me and the channel, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.